Well, let me just ask you about this before we move on to the sort of the sacredness of it, because the argument that I have heard in terms of like what the theory as to why that was put in the Constitution was so that individuals or the citizenry will not be subject to the tyranny that Europeans experienced from monarchs, right? That this is a way to ensure that the citizenry will not be subjected to the tyranny of government. And to be clear, your argument is, in fact, no. It was basically a way of ensuring that Americans were able to sort of maintain an imperialistic project in what was America at that time, and an imperialistic project that involved essentially violence against indigenous people.
Right, and the independence, the War of Independence, was, and you can see in the Declaration of Independence, the enumerated reasons for this, and you have to get down a little ways, to where they did not control the savage Indians on the frontier that attacked them when they would try to take their land. And they called them savages. So this. The French and Indian War, after the French and Indian War, when Britain won against France, and France had to cede that whole territory they claimed, which was over the Appalachian Mountains up into Canada, but only for trading posts. They were settler colonialists in other places later on in Algeria, but in this case, the lucrative fur trade, it was one of the biggest capitalist items. And very early on, the biggest corporation, Astor Fur Company, and all these fur companies. And so they and most of these animals were trapped. They didn't actually use guns that much, by the way. They weren't just going out and hunting. And they got Native people. It was a form of colonialism. They got Native people very caught up in this, where they were basically the proletariat. Bringing in the stuff to sell at the trading post. So that was allowed to continue, the traders, this trade that the Britain would just allow that whole area to be Indian country. They called it Indian country, and free of any settlement. And they did a proclamation drawing a line at the mountain range, Appalachian and Allegheny Mountains. And during this period, and even during the French and Indian War, and even before, there were settlers going out, including these militias, George Washington's militia, these planters' militias. They were going out and actually taking mapping, survey teams, surveying the land and coming back and selling unceded Indian land and cross, and that was what the proclamation was about, to prevent that, because it caused the Native people to then fight them and keep them out. And they didn't want any more war with France, basically Britain. It wasn't they had any sympathy for the Native people. They just didn't want to have European. They wanted to go colonize India and not be in European wars anymore. So it was their own self-interest, but it was to the advantage and a great victory for the indigenous people to be able to maintain their freedom. So George Washington was a mainland speculator. They all were. The founders were all, they were slavers, okay, but, that was just normal at the time, as if it was normal. And they were, but they weren't, they weren't crass. They were kind of, democratic aristocrats how they're portrayed, but they were land speculators. All of them were real estate men. I've said Trump is actually the embodiment of the founders. They were all, even the ones from the North, they were all land speculators. Land, what came to be real estate, and in the Northwest Ordinance, which preceded the Constitution and became a part of it, they had mapped out that land. They have the maps in the Northwest Ordinance. And Northwest meant Ohio, Michigan, Illinois, not Oregon and Washington yet. It was an imperialist project, and they actually did have these maps drawn, as a destination being the Pacific Ocean. So that's what Britain was preventing, is the continuation of imperialism in North America. They wanted out of it. So basically, they took over the U.S. and continued that, became much more powerful than Britain or any other power in the world or in any other power in human history. So that's exceptional. There's so many things exceptional about the United States that when we rely, most historians, and I was trained in history by these historians who write this stuff, and they're so Eurocentric. They look back for any predecessors, in European history, and they don't see the native resistance and real estate as they're finally coming to see that the Cotton Kingdom was the fountain of building U.S. capitalism and was actually not in the northern industrial area, and that slavery was encoded into it, as well as ethnic cleansing east of the Mississippi.